Chapter 6 of Top of the Ladder, Marine Operations in the Northern Solomons by John C. Chapin. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Coconut Grove Battle. On D+10, 11 November, a new operation order was issued. Continue the attack with the 3rd Marine Division on the right, east, and the 37th Infantry Division on the left, west. An Army Marine Artillery Group was assembled under IMAC control to provide massed fire, and Marine Air would be on call for close support. The first objective in the renewed push was to seize control of the critical junction of the Numa Numa Trail and the East-West Trail. On 13 November, a company of the 21st Marines led off the advance at 0800. At 1100, it was ambushed by a sizable enemy force concealed in a coconut palm grove near the trail junction. The Japanese had won the race to the crossroads, and the situation for the lead Marine Company soon became critical. The 2nd Battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Eustace R. Smoke, sent up his executive officer, Major Glenn Fissel, with the 12th Marines artillery observers. They reported the situation as all bad. Then Major Fissel was killed. Disdaining flank security, Smoke moved closer to the fight and fed in reinforcing companies. By now, a lateral road across the front of the perimeter had been built. The next day, tanks were brought up and artillery registered around the battalion. Smoke also called in 18 torpedo bombers. The reorganized riflemen lunged forward again in a renewed attack. The tanks proved an ineffective disaster, causing chaos at one point by firing on fellow Marines on their flank and running over several of their own men. Nevertheless, the Japanese positions were overrun by the end of the day, with the enemy survivors driven off into a swamp. The Marines now commanded the junction of the two vital trails. As a result, the entire beachhead was able to spring forward 1,000 to 1,500 yards, reaching Inland Defense Line D 5,000 yards from the beach. One important result of this advance was that the two main airstrips could now be built. The airfields would be the work of the Seabees. The 25th, 53rd, and 71st Naval Construction Battalions, Seabees, had landed on D-Day with the assault waves of the 3rd Marine Division to get ready at once to build roads, airfields, and camp areas. They had a fighter strip operating at Torokina by December. Always close to Marines, the Seabees earned their merit in the eyes of the Leathernecks. Often, Marines had to clear the way with fire so a Seabee could do his work. Many would recall the bold Seabee bulldozer driver covering a sputtering machine gun nest with his blade. Marines on the Piva Trail later saw another determined bulldozer operator filling in holes in the tarmac of his burgeoning bomber strip as fast as Japanese artillery could tear it up. Any Marine who returned from the dismal swamps toward the beach would retain the wonderment of the Marine Drive. It was a 2-lane asphalt highway, complete with wide shoulders and drainage ditches. It lay across jungle so dense that the tired men had had to hack their way through it only a week or so before. Meanwhile, back on the beach, the U.S. Navy had been busy pouring in supplies and men. By D+12, it had landed more than 23,000 cargo tons and nearly 34,000 men. Marine fighters overhead provided continuous cover from Japanese air attacks. The Marine 3rd Defense Battalion was set up with long-range radar and its anti-aircraft guns to give further protection. This battalion also had long-range 155mm guns that pounded Japanese attacks against the perimeter. By now, the 37th Infantry Division on the left was on firm ground, facing scattered opposition and able to make substantial advances. It was very different for the 3rd Marine Division on the right. Lagoons and swamps were everywhere. The riflemen were in isolated, individual positions, little islands of men perched in what they sarcastically called dry swamps. This meant the water and or slimy mud was only shoe-top deep rather than up to their knees or waists, as it was all around them. This nightmare kind of terrain, combined with heavy, daily drenching rains, precluded digging foxholes. So their machine guns had to be lashed to tree trunks, while the men huddled miserably in the water and mud. They carried little in their packs, except that a variety of pills was essential to stay in fighting shape in their oppressive, bug-infested environment. Salt tablets, sulfa powder, aspirin, iodine, vitamins, atabrine tablets for suppressing malaria, and insect repellent. Colonel Fraser West, who at Bougainville commanded a company of the 9th Marines, was interviewed by monks 45 years later. He still remembered painfully what constantly living in the slimy swamp water did to the Marines. With almost no change of clothing, sand rubbing against the skin, stifling heat, and constant immersion in water, jungle rot was a pervasive problem. Men got it on their scalps, under their arms, in their genital areas, just all over. It was a miserable affliction, and in combat there was very little that could be done to alleviate it. The only thing you could do was with the jungle ulcers. I'd get the corpsman to light a match on a razor blade, split the ulcer open, and squeeze sulfanilamide powder in it. I must have had at one time 30 jungle ulcers on me. This was fairly typical. Corpsmen painted many Marines with skin infections with tincture of methylate or a potassium permanganate solution, so that they looked like the pics of long ago who went into battle with their bodies daubed with blue woad. The Marines who had survived the first 2 weeks of the campaign were by now battle-wise. They intuitively carried out their platoon tactics in jungle fighting, whether in offense or defense. They understood their enemy's tactics, and all signs indicated that they were winning. Sidebars. Navajo Code Talkers. Marines who heard the urgent combat messages said Navajo sounded sometimes like gurgling water. Whatever the sound, the ancient tongue of an ancient warrior clan confused the Japanese. The Navajo code talkers were busily engaged on Bougainville and had already proved their worth on Guadalcanal. The Japanese could never fathom a language committed to sounds. Originally, there were many skeptics who disdained the use of the Navajo language as infeasible. Technical Sergeant Philip Johnston, who originally recommended the use of Navajo talkers as a means of safe voice transmissions in combat, convinced a hard-headed colonel by a 2-minute Navajo dispatch. Encoding and decoding, the colonel then admitted, would have engaged his team well over an hour. When the chips were down, time was short, and the message was urgent, Navajo saved the day. Only Indians could talk directly into the radio mic without concern for security. They would read the message in English, absorb it mentally, then deliver the words in their native tongue, direct, uncoded, and quickly. You couldn't fault the Japanese. Even other Navajos who weren't code talkers couldn't understand the code talkers' transmissions because they were in a code within the Navajo language. Corpsmen. Less than 1% of battle casualties on Bougainville died of wounds after being brought to a field hospital, and during 50 operations conducted as the Battle of the Coromacina raged and bullets whipped through surgeons' tents, not a patient was lost. Those facts reflect the skill and dedication of the corpsmen, surgeons, and litter bearers who performed in an environment of enormous difficulty. Throughout the fight for the perimeter, the field hospitals were shelled and shaken by bomb blasts, even while surgical operations were being conducted. Every day there was rain and mud, and surgeons practiced their craft with mud to their shoelaces. Corpsmen were shot as they treated the wounded right at the battle scene. Others were shot as the Japanese ignored the International Red Cross emblem for ambulances and aid stations. Bougainville was the first time in combat for the corpsmen assigned to the 3rd Marine Division. 2 surgeons were with each battalion, and, as in all other battles, a corpsman was with each platoon. Aid stations were as close as 30 to 50 yards behind the lines. The men from the division band were the litter bearers, always on the biting edge of combat. Many young Marines were not aware until combat just how close they would be to these corpsmen who wore the Marine uniform and who would undergo every hardship and trial of the men on the line. The corpsman's job required no commands. He was simply always there to patch up the wounded Marine enough to have him survive and get to a field hospital. Naval officers seldom had command over the corpsman. He was responsible directly to the platoon, company, and battalion to which he was assigned. Ashore on D-Day with the invading troops, Pharmacist Mate 2nd Class Andrew Bernard later remembered setting up his 3rd Marines Regimental Aid Station, just inland in the muck off the beach beside the Sea Medical Field Hospital. Later, as action intensified, Bernard saw 15 to 20 wounded Marines waiting at the hospital for care, and commented, "This was when I noticed Dr. Duncan Shepard." The flaps of the hospital tent were open, and there was Dr. Shepard operating away, so calm, so brave, so courageous, as though he was back in the Mayo Clinic, where he had trained. On 7 December, the Japanese attacked around the Koromokina. The official history of the 3rd Marine Division described the scene. The division hospital, situated near the beach, was subjected to daily air raids and twice to artillery shelling. Company E of the 3rd Medical Battalion, which was the division hospital under Commander R. Calloway, U.S. Navy, proved that delicate work could be carried on even in combat. During the battle, the field hospital was attacked. Bullets ripped through the protecting tent, seriously wounding a pharmacist's mate. Hellzapoppin Ridge was the most intense and miserable of the battles for the corpsmen of Bougainville, according to Pharmacist Mate 1st Class Carroll Garnett. He and 3 other corpsmen were assigned to the forward aid station located at the top of that bloody ridge. The 2 battalion surgeons were considered indispensable and discouraged from taking undue risks. Regardless, Assistant Battalion Surgeon Lieutenant Edmund A. Utkowitz, U.S. Navy Reserve, insisted on joining the corpsmen at the forward station and remained there throughout the entire battle. The doctor and his 4 assistants were often in the open, exposed to fire, and showered with the dust thrown up by mortar explosions. The corpsman's routine was stop the bleeding, apply sulfa powder and battle dressing, shoot syrette of morphine, and administer plasma. The regular aid station was located at the bottom of the ridge, where the battalion surgeon, Lieutenant Commander Horace L. Wolfe, U.S. Navy Reserve, checked the wounded again before sending them off in an ambulance, if available, to a better equipped station or a field hospital. Corpsmen and Marines were in deadly peril atop the ridge. Corpsman John A. Wetterland described volunteers bringing in a wounded paramarine who was still breathing when he and the medical team were hit anew by a shell. 1 corpsman was killed, another badly wounded, and Wetterland was badly mauled by mortar fragments, though he tried, he said, to bandage myself. Dr. Wolfe later painted a grim picture of the taut circumstances under which the medics worked. Several of my brave corpsmen were killed in this action. The regimental band musicians were the litter bearers. I still remember the terrible odor of our dead in the tropical heat. The smell pinched one's nostrils and clung to clothing. During combat in the swamps, about all one could do to try to purify water to drink was to put 2 drops of iodine solution in a canteen. Night was the worst, when we could not evacuate our sick and wounded. But if one could get a ride to the airstrip on the Jeep ambulance to put the sick and wounded on evacuation planes, one could see a female, Navy or Army nurses, for the first time in many months. End of chapter 6.